Magic, the David Paton story. Discovering the Beatles at the age of 14. David Paton had no idea that one day he'd work with Paul McCartney in Studio 2 at Abbey Road, or that he'd write a #1 worldwide hit, or he'd spend 3 years touring the world and recording as a bass player with Elton John, including playing at Live Aid. He's put it all down in a book. The book is called Magic. I hope I got his name right. David Paton joins us now. David, first of all, did I get your name right?
It's generally Paton.
Paton. All right, there you go. First home. So tell us about how it all started then, David. Whereabouts were you, and when you first heard that Beatles track, and was it the proverbial bolt from the blue?
Well, it kind of was, I suppose. I heard them on the radio to begin with. But my musical career really started when I was 11 years old, and my family took a vacation to San Sebastian, of all places, and they were running the Bulls then, and I got caught up in that myself, and I took shelter in a doorway as the Bulls thundered by, and then I was left with a kind of tranquil peacefulness, and I could hear a guitar playing. And I walked down the street a little bit, and there was a guy my age, 11 years old, sitting on a windowsill playing a Spanish guitar. And I was hooked from, that was a thunderbolt, that moment then. You know, the jacaranda trees and the smell and the sunshine on my back. It was just, I just sat on the pavement and listened to this guy play for 10 or 15 minutes until somebody called his name and off he went. I went back to the hotel and said to my parents, I must have a Spanish guitar.
Did your parents not say, where on earth, what happened to you? We were scanning the hospitals to see if you'd been trampled by the fighting bulls of Pamplona.
I don't think they were aware that the bulls were going to be running either.
So you then went back to, I didn't even ask where originally you're from, and got a Spanish guitar then? Was that how it started?
Yeah, they bought me a Spanish guitar in San Sebastian. It was put into a cardboard box and put in the hold of the plane and made it all the way back to Edinburgh. That's where I'm from. And I was mesmerised from then on. You know, just the look of the guitar, the smell of the wood. I was just smitten. I couldn't put the thing down. When my mates rang the doorbell, I wasn't available. I was locked in my room playing the guitar.
So how did you learn the guitar? Was it Burt Weldon? Was it listening to other records? I mean, how did you? Because it's one thing to have the guitar. I mean, I had a friend who was a sax player, and it sat in the corner for about 5 years because it looked good and the girls liked it, but he couldn't play a note. So you know, how did you knuckle down and learn it, David?
I bought a couple of tutors, and I would learn chords. So I'd learn a fistful of chords. And then when I read these, you know, things like The Big Rock Candy Mountain, the songs that were pretty easy to play, but that was my beginning. I would read the chords. And then when as you know, the Beatles were a huge influence on me. When they came along, I started to use my ear to listen to the chords on the records, and that was me. I spent a lot of time using my ear for that purpose, which served me well in future, you know, with session work and whatnot.
So, I mean, the early 60s sort of transmorph into the mid-stroke late 60s, and there's a big folk scene, and there's a big singer-songwriter scene. We attempted to go around that sort of sensitive, long-haired singer-songwriter in a folk club somewhere near Leith or something like that, or what did you decide your style was going to be, David?
No, I lacked in confidence to do anything like that. In fact, the first time I appeared on stage, I think I stood with my back to the audience. I was so apprehensive about doing that kind of thing, about performing. I did love the guitar, and I realised that I would love to have a career playing the guitar, but my shyness held me back quite a bit. It was fine getting on stage with a band. Then I had other guys out there, especially if I had a lead singer. You know, I could hide in the background.
So how did you get the band together then? Did you was it a couple of mates? Did you put an advert in the newsagents, an advert in the music press? Kids ask your parents about the music press. I mean, how did you get a band together?
I lucky enough, I discovered a school friend who was in a different class from me, but he kind of stood out because he was one of these guys with the long hair, as you just described. I kind of knew he was a musician, and I graduated towards him, and I found out that he loved to play the guitar. He loved to play the bass guitar as well, which was the two things that I graduated towards, because Paul McCartney was a huge hero of mine. So I loved playing bass and guitar. So the both of us used to sit in a room and just play together. Sometimes I'd play bass, sometimes I'd play guitar. And it was generally Beatles songs that we would go through and sing them together and play them together. And we amalgamated eventually into a band, and we would ask bigger bands if we could play during their break. That was the start of it.
And so, I mean, did you find moving from a Spanish guitar to electric? Because a lot of people, it's a different technique, it's a different style. Surely you must have sort of literally done your fingers in the first couple of times.
I think because a Spanish guitar has nylon strings and it has a wider neck, I always find it more easy to play on nylon strings than to do on steel strings. So it was easy to graduate from Spanish guitar. And apart from that, I hadn't really learned how to play as a Spanish guitar player. I just used it as an instrument. And I have become a bit more proficient at classical music now. So, I like my Bach and stuff like that. But, the transition to electric guitar was quite easy for me. And it was where I wanted to go anyway. I wanted to emulate the Beatles. I wanted to be Paul McCartney.
So how did you suddenly think, hang on, we've got something here? And when did was this the first band, the band that you stuck with, or did it transmorph? I mean, tell me a little bit about where you go from being being a support band for a local band into being on top of the pops and having number one hits.
Well, that's a long story, but it eventually changed into my sister was always encouraging me, and she said she was reading the newspaper and she said, "Look, here's a band advertising. They want a lead guitarist." I said, "What are they called?" She said, "They're called the Beachcombers." And I thought, "Oh, they're a huge band in Edinburgh. I'm not good enough for that." But she encouraged me and said, "Make the phone call and I'll come with you to the audition." I did. I made the phone call, did the audition, and lo and behold, they liked me and I got the gig. Within a year or so, we were travelling to London, and we got a deal with CBS Records, and we also got a residency at the Marquee Club in Wardour Street. We were a good band, and we had a couple of singles released. We had a spot on the Tony Blackburn show on the TV, but not a lot came of it. And we went back to Edinburgh with our tails between our legs, and I joined, of all bands, the Bay City Rollers. So I was in them for about a year. But I realised I didn't want to be a Bay City Roller. I listened to bands like Genesis and Yes, King Crimson, and I wanted to emulate that kind of proficiency in guitar playing. So I left the band just before they signed and had their major success. I thought, that's me. I'm stuck I was on the Mecca circuit at that time, playing in Tiffany's. But another band formed that I became a part of, and we had, again, some quite good success in Edinburgh. And then I met Billy Lyle, who's a keyboard player from Pilot. He was an engineer in a studio in Edinburgh, and he had lots of free time to write songs and record them. And he asked me if I would come down, play guitar for him. I said I'd be delighted to. He said, "I'll play piano for you if you write some songs." So there was the incentive for me to start writing songs. And we'd meet maybe once a week and record a brand new song each week. Every week he would say to me, "Next Wednesday, have another new song ready." So, we did that for over a year, and we had a great collection of songs after a year, and Magic was one of them.
I mean, one of the things you just pointed out there, because, you're an Edinburgh-based band, it's a long way to go down south. And it's a huge leap. I mean, you could have just been the biggest band in Edinburgh back in the day, but I know you think about the Newcastle bands as well, all the Scottish bands, because obviously those guys who are living in Surbiton and Surrey have an advantage because they've got the big smoke on their doorstep. So a huge leap of faith from you to leave where and go basically to a foreign environment.
Well, we did get a leg up because our drummer joined us, Stuart Tosh, who also went on to work with 10cc. Stuart Tosh said to me, I went to school with a guy who now works for EMI Records. He's a label manager. He says, why don't I give him a call? He said, David, you've got hit songs there. Let's do something with them. I said, make the call, Stuart. If we can get a meeting with a label manager, it's a foot in the door. When we did go to EMI in Manchester Square in London, and the label manager was knocked out with the songs he heard. And he got the general manager, the head of A&R, to come and listen to the demos that we had presented. And he said to us there and then, guys, you've got a deal if you want it. And he said, well, I knew EMI owned Abbey Road Studios. What could be better than to work in the Beatles workshop, to work in Studio 2? And that's what happened. It's like a dream come true. You wish you could work in the Beatles studio, and lo and behold, it happened.
And what was it like walking into Abbey Road? I mean, the history, the atmosphere, etc.
I think I got down on my knees and kissed the floor before I got into the place. You're just full of awe working in Abbey Road. I mean, even just visitors going to Abbey Road, but to actually sit down with a guitar and start recording, it's a totally different level. And I was lucky enough to go on and work with the Alan Parsons Project. We did a lot of albums in Abbey Road. Kate Bush, we did albums in Abbey Road. Chris Rea, Krista Byrne, lots of people. So I spent a good 10 years with Abbey Road being the main studio that I visited and worked in.
And also, I mean, there are a lot of really good songwriters out there, but is it a combination of luck, skill, marketing that the tracks that you took down on that day picked up, and you had with Magic you had a huge number one, and also it must have been quite interesting to get away from going down that sort of teeny bop, Bay City Rollers, long haired, pretty boy kind of look, and be considered a serious musician.
Yes, but we even
you're not a pretty boy now, David. By the way,
we even rebelled to the extent that we grew moustaches. This was our little rebellion. We don't want to be recognised as a teeny bop band. We think we're more than that. Modelling ourselves on the Beatles type band, we wrote our own songs. Our first album, we called them Paton Lyle compositions, just like Lennon McCartney did. We kind of emulated that way, and that's what we wanted to achieve. And to a certain extent, we did achieve that, even although we emerged in the height of teeny bops bands. We still got a little bit of respect, which helped us move on from Pilot into working with other bands and musicians. And as you say, I spent 3 years with Elton John. It all comes from Pilot and people listening to what we were doing, listening to the bass, listening to the guitar, and saying, oh, I like that. And a producer would say, oh, I like that bass player. Let's try and get him on a session. That's how it went for me. And lucky enough, that's where I wanted to go anyway.
I was going to say, is that more interesting when you've had not your 5 minutes, but boy band, girl band, 3 years max, isn't it, the turnaround, basically. So when you've done that and you've been there, you've done all the touring, the whole thing, if you are regarded by your peers as somebody you bring on, so you're not constricted by the band format and that pressure to write another single, but you're playing as a session or on the road with people that you respect, that's probably the best way of living your life, Dave.
Absolutely. And when I get people like I had George Michael say to me, I was rehearsing for Live Aid with Elton, and George Michael walked into the studio and saw me up at the back with my bass. He came walking towards me, and he came over and he said, "David Paton," he said, "I'd just like to thank you for writing January." He said, "It was a huge influence on my songwriting." And what can you say? You know, I just said...
So let's actually just casually drop that in. I was playing for Elton at Live Aid, as you do. So what point did Mr. John, I don't know what we call him these days, Sir Elt, at what point did you guys connect? Was it sort of late 70s, early 80s? What was the trajectory of that one? And he must be an interesting one to work with, because he is a perfectionist, isn't it, to put it mildly?
He is. He would do no more than 2 takes for a song. For instance, I met up with him in 1985. I was asked along to the studio to play on an album called Ice on Fire. And Nikita was the song on that album that you can really hear the bass on. So that's me playing the bass. And it was just by accident that when I arrived at the studio, Elton was there in the studio and we were left on our own. And I said to him, "I'm going to tune up my basses." So I went over to my bass guitar and I picked up a fretless bass, started to tune it. Elton sat down at the piano and started to play a bunch of chords that I didn't recognise. But I got the hint that he wanted me to play along with him. Maybe it was a kind of audition, you know. Uh-huh. So I did. I played along with him. We did that for maybe 20 minutes. And within that time, he kept looking over at me and smiling as if to say, "You're doing exactly what I want to hear." And he said, "That's great, David." He said, "We're going to record this song now. It's called Nikita, so let's do it." And that was it. We did Nikita there and then.
Huge worldwide hit, I have to say. I mean, every time there's a best of, if I'm driving down the road in Spain, somebody will pick that on. And you're right, it is the one with perhaps the most prominent bass line. I didn't realise it was fretless, but the most prominent bass line.
Yeah, I didn't actually play it like a fretless bass because I didn't intend to use a fretless bass on that particular song when I started playing it, but he said he loved it. He said, "That's a great sound, a good sound of bass. Keep that bass for this recording." And that's just the way it went. A fretless bass is not the easiest instrument to play, you know. But he was delighted, and he said to me, "Throw in as many licks as you want," and I did. So it's quite a busy bass part for me, you know. But that's what he wanted, and I wanted to make him happy. And you know what? Playing with Elton John, it's like the quality of the songs tend to bring the best out on me because I'm working with such an established artist who gets a lot of respect, and he's writing great songs, and to play on a song like Nikita is a great thrill. And as a bass player, I was inspired myself to play an interesting part.
And also, you mentioned that so Live Aid was one of the first times you'd played with him. I mean, talk about a big gig. For goodness, I thought he would have had a bass player been playing with, you know, for at least sort of 3 or 4 years because of the way it's a one-shot thing. You've got a huge audience, and you've only got, what was it, sort of 6 minutes tops in the thing.
I know. It was the first gig I did with him, the very first gig, and then we did a world tour which lasted a year. But Live Aid, he just mentioned this Live Aid, and of course I'd heard everybody talk about Mid-Year and whatnot. They were all talking about it. And here's Elton John's appearing on Live Aid. I couldn't have been more thrilled, especially on the day. And switch the television on, and there's Status Quo singing "Rockin' All Over the World," you know. And I thought, I'm going to be there tonight. I'm going to be on that stage. It was a huge thrill for me.
And no Collywell, you didn't think, "Oh my goodness, I'm going to be on that stage." You thought, "This is what."
Oh yes, I was pretty nervous about it, but I'm kind of nervous before any gig, and I think that's a good thing to be that way. Nervous and excited that I was going to be working with Elton John. I'm in the Elton John band. Oh, that was a great thrill.
And of course, I mean, everybody remembers Live Aid. I mean, I was whatever I was then and just watched it on TV for, I think, however many hours straight. From there, you go touring, and that must have been quite fun because had you toured, I mean, presumably an Elton John tour is the full package, and it's Europe, Asia, the US. I mean, how long were you on tour, and what's it like being on that sort of tour?
It's like getting a first-class ticket to around the world. And we were given first-class treatment. We were given 5-star hotels, first-class flights everywhere we went. It's like being in Disneyland for a year. And you never know who you're going to meet next. I was introduced to people like Princess Diana, Sylvester Stallone, Roy Orbison, George Harrison, and you name it. I was introduced, and Elton took great pleasure in introducing his band to all the celebrities that came to his gig. And he looked after us really well.
It must be quite funny if you look out over the VIP and there's a Sinatra or a Stallone sitting there waving at you, and you're thinking, oh blimey, this is surreal, because I bought a Spanish guitar and was playing it back in Edinburgh.
That's true. It's I suppose I lived the dream that every musician wants to do. As a songwriter, writing a number one song is the best achievement a songwriter could do. I achieved that. And then to work with somebody like Elton John as a musician, that's a wonderful achievement as well. So, I lived the dream and I had a great time doing it.
So how do you approach the craft? I mean, can you just be walking down the street and a melody pops in or a lyric pops in, and you just scribble it down or shout into your phone, or do you just today I am going to write a song and lock yourself in a studio and don't come out till you've got something half decent? How does it work, David?
A lot of the time it's somebody will say something to me and it sticks in my head. I remember when I wrote Magic, for instance, I wrote the chorus. And all I had was the chorus, which is only 4 bars long. But at that time, I used to record everything onto a cassette player. So I'd be playing the piano and Magic came into my head. Oh, it's Magic. Oh, this is nice. So record. And then I'd move on to something else. I was getting up early the next again morning, and my wife said to me, I've never been awake to see the daybreak. And that stuck in my head. And I thought, I could hear a melody when she said it. I could hear, I've never been away, hey, never seen a daybreak. And I thought, that's going to go great with my little Magic chorus. And that was it. That's how it came about. And it was the same with January. It was my wife, again, who said, I'm reading a book, and the main character in the book, her name's January. I said, oh, isn't that unusual? You'll hear girls called April or June, but January. And I was on my way to write songs anyway, and I just sat down in the studio, and the first word that came out of my head was January. So that's how that came about. A lot of the time it is just a suggestion from somebody. When these little booklets came out and they had Love Is written in the corner, I wrote a song called Love Is just because I looked at that.
And I mean, you get a lot of people saying, "Oh, well, this song is like it follows me around." But did you never had any problem? Because it launched the career and you had several hits off the back of it. So presumably you're very fond of it.
The biggest thrill I think is my grandson. He's 12 years old, and he likes to introduce his friends to me because they all know the song. And and he says, this is my granddad. He's the one that wrote Magic, and they're absolutely thrilled to meet me. And that is a big thrill to think, I wrote that song 49 years ago, and here's kids know the song and think it's a great song. That's a great thrill. I had Brian Wilson say to me, you wrote Magic. He said, I wish I'd written that song.
Oh.
It is. I went backstage at one of his gigs. I know one of the band, Probin Gregory, plays in his band. And Probin invited me backstage. And he kept telling me, he says, Brian loves your song. He plays it all the time in the bus. So I was introduced to him, and Probin said, this is David Paton, is the guy that wrote Magic. And he said, wow, you wrote Magic. I wish I'd written that song. I said, can I have my photo taken with you? He said, okay. So I sat down beside Brian, and he kept looking at me rather than looking at the camera. And he just said to me, never believe it's not so. And I thought, yes, he really does know the song.
It must be a song you wrote yourself that means so much to so many people. It must be wonderful when people say, "Oh, your song really touched me," and I went and danced with that girl, and now we're married and have grandkids, etc.
Exactly. exactly that. When I had to go into hospital for an operation, and the surgeon said to me before I went under, he said, "So what do you do, Mr. Paton?" I said, "I'm a musician." He said, "What kind of musician?" I said, "Well, I write songs." But he said, "Have you written any songs that I might know?" I said, "I wrote a song called January in the 70s. He said, I know that song. I met my wife to that song." He says, "And we got married to that song as well." And I thought, well, there you go. You know, the song has moved people in a way. And I just think, you know, a worldwide hit, and it touches so many people. I can't explain how I feel about that.
And so the book, thought it was time to put it all down in one tome because it's been quite a ride. And it's not over yet, obviously.
I don't think it's over yet, but you never know. I'm 73 now. But I still enjoy writing songs. I still enjoy playing. And my book started off just as memoirs for my grandkids and great-grandkids, and etc., to read and get a little insight into the kind of life that I had. But it grew legs. And eventually a friend of mine said, "You should get this to a publisher. Here's a publisher. Send your ideas to him." So I did. And the publisher, Sonic Bond, they said, "We love this. If you can finish it off, we'll be really interested. Just give us 80,000 words." And at that time, I only had about 50,000 words, but there was the incentive to finish the book. And and it's doing really well. I'm really happy with it.
Yes, you must be. But I'm saying you must be because of the reaction, which is very gratifying indeed, and also the fact that you can kind of remember it all as well.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you've ever written a book, but once you start, you know, one thing can lead on to another. You know, I maybe have a vague recollection of something, but once I start writing it down, I get a bigger picture. I can see it more clearly. And also, you know, other people might jog your memory. When they knew I was writing a book, they would say, "Do you remember the time this happened and that happened?" Things that I had totally forgotten about, they suddenly emerged and they appear in the book now.
Well, the book is called Magic, the David Paton story. It's available now. David, if people want to find you online, do you have a website? Do you do the social media? Where can people find what you're up to in the nicest possible way?
Yes, I have a website. It's just davidpaton.com. There's also a pilot website, and that is pilot-magic.com.
And are you touring? Are you going out on the road with this one, or do you think, are you writing at the studio at the moment?
When COVID struck, I was about to set off to Japan, and that was delayed. So we're back in contact and trying to arrange another. Pilot are still very successful in Japan, so we're trying to arrange another tour in Japan later this year.
Great stuff. Well, thanks for talking to me today. The book is called Magic. It's the David Paton story. David, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you.